Brown says, get that India. Big boy.
Call an ambulance! Maybe call a police! Oh, what a shot! What a shot! Campbell Graham!
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Tip Sheet Podcast. As always, I'm your host, John, also known as 4020. And we're back to a two-man crew this week. No guest host. They'll be back on the schedule moving forwards, though. But joining me, as always, to talk about the latest from Parradise and the NRL in general is my good mate, Sixties. Big fella, more manic swings in the weather. We've had just about 4 seasons in one across the last couple of days. But a bit of stuff happening in Parradise too. A big announcement just as we go to record. In fact, it's what prompted us to expedite our recording. The Parramatta Eels have a new captain, and we'll get to that shortly. But first, as always, how you doing, big fella?
Mate, I'm doing really well. Training's returned from Lennox Head back to Kellyville this week. So been up there for the first couple of training sessions of this week. I'll talk a little bit more about that momentarily. But yeah, mate, it's really weird, this weather bouncing around. I mean, we had the other day where it got up to about 42 degrees out here. It was absolutely insane, the temperature.
Yes.
And
then
now we're
winds,
into a return to the rain, and it's crazy times. But I guess this is the what we're meant to have these days with the supposed climate change, or what have you, or whether we got the El Nino effect, or what is it, El Nina and El Nino? Are they the two different types? I lose track.
La Nina and El Nino, I believe. The boy and the girl.
Yeah, that's it. So the two halves of the weather systems. So, but mate, just before we get into it, as usual, anyone that's listening to this, no matter what your platform you're on, if you can give it a like and subscribe, that really helps with getting this content out to as many Eels supporters as we possibly can. And I mean, we've had some fantastic numbers listening to the podcast so far this year. So we really appreciate that. Shout out to our sponsors. First of all, Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan and Parramatta for their ongoing support of the Cumberland Throw. And also to Parra Leagues, who support our coverage of junior rugby league in the Parramatta district, because as everyone's aware, they are absolutely brilliant in their support, their generous financial support of junior rugby league in the Parramatta district. And we appreciate them also, the club also sponsoring our coverage of junior rugby league, including the junior rep season, which is about to kick off. John, and just on that, here's some big stats from us. We have just ticked over 5 million site visits to the Cumberland Throw since we first kicked off. And that is absolutely phenomenal for us to be able to read. We're really humbled by, when you hit with a figure like that, just bang, like it's quite something to think that people have taken the time 5 million times to click onto the Cumberland Throw. We really appreciate that level of support, people, and we know it's a passion for thousands of Parramatta supporters, and we appreciate being part of your support of the mighty Blue and Golds. And just further to that, we're about to hit a brand new record month, all-time record month, in of all months, January. That's right, we're about to go past 100,000 site visits for January, which is just absolutely phenomenal. I mean, it will go past the all-time record month, as I said, but the best January up till now was a couple of years back, I think, coming out of the back of the grand final season, and we had about 74 or 76,000 site visits in January that year, which was absolutely brilliant. But to have over 100,000 for this January it's who knows, mate. We might be on track for 1 million site visits in the season, which would, of course, be something else. So, and just a little reminder that if any companies out there, any small businesses or large businesses, if you're interested in joining up with the Cumberland Throw to partner with us, there are sponsorship opportunities available. We'd love to hear from you. So if you're a really keen Parramatta supporter, and you've got your own business, or you might work for someone and say, hey, look, we're all Parramatta supporters here. Why don't we get on board with the Cumberland Throw and help them to get their content out to Eels supporters? We'd really love to hear from you. So this is our 10th season in covering the Parramatta Eels, everything from junior reps all the way through to the NRL and NRLW. So, just get in touch with us, and we'd love to talk to you about partnering with us for the season. So, John, without any further ado, let's get into the news.
News team, assemble!
Well, mate, there's you've already touched on it. You gave a little bit of a spoiler there, but Mitch Moses has just been announced as the Eels captain for the 2025 season. It's not entirely a surprise to most people. I think that was the tip that was going around, but it's certainly made for the ascendancy of a player who began as a Parramatta junior, found himself at the Tigers for a short period of time, and has now been with the Eels since 2017. Good news, mate?
Oh, obviously very good news. And look, I certainly hinted and maybe teased and spoiled in the opening comments here, but this is also spoiled and teased on the other side of Christmas, wasn't it, back last year when there were strong media reports that Mitchell Moses was Jason Ryles' man for the C next to his name. So things have played out as expected here. And Mitch, we've seen Mitch grow in status and his ability to lead a team, even without the captaincy tied to his name in recent years. And he's certainly been the right-hand man of Quinton Gufferson throughout the last few seasons. So it's time for him to step into the spotlight in his own right and take the mantle of his team and try and lead them through. It's not a rebuild, I suppose. They're aiming to be hyper competitive this year, aren't they, 60? So he's got to find a way to spearhead them back into the top 8.
Well, Mitch Moses, we know how competitive he is, and he really has, as you said, grown. He's grown as a player. He's become a representative, world-class player. And really, if you've got a halfback who's an organiser and a leader, then you have a natural captain. And I think he's probably, he is undoubtedly the number one choice because he's going to be out on the field for 80 minutes each week. He's the player that's barking instructions at his teammates all through the game. That's what you have to have from a halfback, someone who's prepared to, I guess, even rip into his forwards if they're not doing the work that they need to do. So, he's a natural in that role through the position that he plays in the team. He's earned the respect of the rugby league public and obviously his teammates through his ascension as an elite player in recent years. And he's going to be ably supported by the leadership group, which understandably includes Junior Paulo. It includes Jermaine Hopgood, who is arguably a captain of the future at the club, and also new recruit Jack Williams. And we'd heard lots of good reports around the traps about Jack Williams from players that had played with him at the Sharks. He was highly respected there, not only as a player, but as an individual. And from what I've seen at training as well, I think he's going to be a natural as a leader within the club. So I think good news all around there, mate. I like that group as a leadership group.
Yeah, I mean, Junior's got almost incumbency in that regard, hasn't he? He has been a co-captain in recent years, and he slides into that leadership role as part of that leadership group easily. And like you said, Jermaine Hopgood's a player that it feels like has been earmarked for greater responsibilities in the future, and this will be a great chance for him to sort of ply his trade in, not vice captaincy, but something similar to it, right? And then probably the most pleasing thing is seeing someone like Jack Williams come in and impress to the point that the new coach has said, well, hang on, this guy's worthy of being appointed to the leadership group. And I suppose that speaks to the role that he now occupies within the team. We've speculated in my Team West post on New Year's Eve that he could be a guy that's pushing for starting responsibilities, and this sort of indicates that he's going to be in that top 17 minimum and potentially a starter, which is awesome recruitment if that's the case.
Yeah, absolutely. Another player who's been really involved as a leader at the club features in the next bit of news, which is Josh Addo-Carr, and it's been confirmed by the NRL that he is eligible to return to the NRL in round 3, which, if he is selected in the first grade team, which you would expect in round 3, that will pit him against his former club in the Bulldogs. So
yeah, another chapter in the great big Bible of sports is scripted, right? Just a classic return against your old club. It's the truth is that reality is often stranger than fiction, isn't it? 60s.
Oh, you could not have scripted this any better. It's it's quite remarkable.
He is employed by the Bulldogs last year, has a serious off-field indiscretion that leads to him getting that particular length suspension that eventually leads to him getting his contract terminated, all of which is fair play. But then he gets picked up by the Eels, who the draw is then shaped to potentially have him meet his old club, pending the ability to count the All-Stars game towards his suspension. It is just incredible. And he served one game of that suspension for the Dogs. Like, everything had to line up for this. Just perfect. But good news for the Eels.
It follows on superbly from the first round being against Jason Ryles.
Yeah, going against Melbourne, yes.
Club, against the Storm. So, as you say, you could not script this any better. And it adds that little bit of extra spice to these rounds, doesn't it? Like that first round against the Storm down in Melbourne, Jason Ryles taking his first game as a head coach to his former club and looking to get one up on his former mentor in Craig Bellamy. And then you've got this headline that'll be there from round 3 with Josh Addo-Carr taking on his former club in the Bulldogs.
And even round 2, home against the Tigers, we've got the big tune-up game the second week of the pre-season challenge against the Tigers. So how much are each team going to show their hands there? The opening 3 rounds is kind of crazy.
Oh, absolutely. And it's I guess this is the theatre that rugby league's become. It's sometimes we moan about some of the media that happens around rugby league, but then it's it does add to the theatre of it all, as I said. Camp at Lennox Head has it wrapped up on Saturday, so the Eels were still training there on Saturday, which meant it was a bit of a belated return to Kellyville. The first session this week was yesterday, being Wednesday, and the feedback that I've had about Lennox Head was all really, really positive stuff. For a start, they apparently had about 200 or more locals turning up every day to watch the training sessions. Just that, and quite a lot of Eels gear being worn by the people that are there, turning up to watch them train. So a lot of local support for the Eels up at Lennox Head. I mean, the support for the Eels is everywhere. We know that they are the highest supported Sydney club, the Parramatta Eels. All the research companies, they come out with those sorts of numbers that puts the Eels on about 500,000 supporters, and that's without a title for nearly 40 years.
In the most competitive community split in Sydney as well. So it's not like they're a one city team like Brisbane, or were a one city team like Brisbane or Melbourne. So
that's it.
Very well supported.
Yeah, absolutely. And we were fortunate because we had one of the locals up there, Leno Eel, he submitted a report for us, which was fantastic. We had messages from people that up in Lennox Head. And then, of course, our own Chris Losco just happened to be up the far north coast when the Eels were up there. So he popped into training and put together a training report that we were able to put on TCT. It had been a while since Chris had actually posted an article on TCT. He's a little bit more of the behind-the-scenes fellow at the Cumberland Throws. So it was good that he was able to get out there, grabbed a few photos, talk to some of the players, watch the training, send in a report for that. So
and it's always good to get that. I mean, obviously we had Leno Eel as well, but just hearing differing opinions and perspectives that sometimes or often fall in line with yours is also, validating, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. When I was reading through the reports and thinking, well, if they're seeing the same things that I'm seeing, then that's fantastic. But more than that as well, the playing group and the staff, they all were very upbeat about what that week was like. So I think there was a fair bit that was achieved in team bonds and getting to know each other while they were away. And all of that augurs well for a campaign that is coming off, such a disappointing season last year. And it continues to add to the positivity which they've built during this pre-season. Now, just getting back to our Eels news, mate, the Fan Day is this week down at CommBank Stadium, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. It's really an interactive sort of day, a day where there's plenty of activities there for the kids and an opportunity to mingle with the players. It's not an organised signing session or anything like that, but you will be able to meet the players. Of course, the players and the coaching staff will be speaking to the people that are there. If you haven't registered, I know it's late in the week now, but please make sure that you do register. It's not a matter of saying, if you don't register, you can't turn up, but it helps them to plan and be ready for how many people are likely to be there on the day. So, do register your attendance with the club. And apart from that, we'll see you down there and enjoy yourselves down there. Now, mate, we're going to wrap up the Eels news with actually some Parramatta Leagues Club news, because they've just sent out an email advising that the Leagues Club AGM will be on the 25th of February at 7 p.m. And the email goes into details about some of the resolutions that are put forward. And one of those is the nomination of Peter Wynn for club patron. When I say nomination, it simply needs the members to vote for it. He's not running against anyone or anything like that. It's really, as club patron, it's an ambassadorial sort of role. It's recognition of the great service that Peter Wynn gave to the club as a player, and then as someone who's been involved with the Leagues Club and with the football club and also the Parramatta community in general. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's a great nomination for Parramatta Leagues Club patron there. There's also, of course, the election for two board directors, Leagues Club board directors. So two of the directors stand down prior to the election, and then become they're actually standing then for election, and I guess in their case re-election, but they're standing for election alongside other candidates. Now, in total, including the two Leagues Club current Leagues Club directors who are standing down, there are 8 nominees for or 8 candidates for election for a Leagues Club board position. What I recommend to people is that, because we're not going to tell you how to vote, that's when we're talking about these sorts of Leagues Club elections, we don't get involved in saying who to vote for or anything like that. What we do say to people, however, is please vote. Right? You can check out the email. It's got the list of candidates for the election and a brief bio on each of the candidates. You can vote electronically now, and it only takes a short period of time, so you can read through who's standing, make your decision about who you'd like to vote for, and vote for them. And it's all done very, very quickly online. You don't have to be down there at the club. Also, if you're not able to vote online, then there is a postal pack that comes out that where you're able to cast your vote by postal vote. So that is an option. Or if you wish, then you can submit your votes on the night. But if you're voting by electronic voting or postal voting, your votes have to be in a few days before. I think it's on the Friday before at close of business, say 5 p.m. So, but check your emails. As I said, it's a very simple process to vote online. The other thing is there's also special resolutions that you're voting on. Now, there's the usual resolutions that you get at AGMs, which is to vote for things like the expenses that board directors incur during the year, that the club pays for those. But there are also some important resolutions which involve changes to the Constitution. Now, this is most important. Now, some of them are resolutions where it's just a little bit of a tidying up of the Constitution as it stands, because it was written a number of years ago, and there are things which are a little bit outdated, things where the wording has to be changed. But there's also important resolutions about people, the capacity for people to nominate to be a director. So I'm not going to go into it too much now, but what I will say is, again, please read your emails. Please click the links to the explanations that are there. And included in the email is a letter from Club President Greg Monaghan, and he explains the rationale from the club's perspective of all of the resolutions and what they're looking to tidy up, what they're looking to address in terms of the Constitution moving forward. So have a read of that, and as I said, vote, because the more people that vote, the more representative the vote is of the wishes of Parramatta Leagues Club members. Don't assume that everything is, don't assume that your vote isn't needed. Your vote is needed. No matter who you vote for, your vote is needed. So make sure you do that. Okay, mate, I think that just about tidies up the Eels news. The junior reps are starting this weekend, but we're going to, if people can listen to the end of this podcast, we are going to do a preview of the Parramatta junior reps round one matches right at the end of this podcast. So as we go a few weeks down the track, we'll have we'll have the return of the special preview podcast. But for now, we're including it in this news podcast. So, John, that just about takes us to your part of the podcast, our musical interlude.
Yeah, I very nearly went with Hey-O by Captain Jack, that old, I say old, like 90s old, sort of a dance song that was popular in clubs back then and on the radio waves too. But I settled for a different tact here. Recently had a rewatch of the outstanding Mr. In Between with my old man, and went through all the way through to the season conclusion at the end of series 3 or season 3, where there was a really good song that was popular back with Vine back in the day, and but it sort of concluded the series in a fantastic way. And I suppose it also can launch the Parramatta series with the junior reps coming up this weekend and trials just around the corner. So I got Run by AOL Nation. Yeah, I cannot recommend Mr. In Between enough. 60s. Scott Ryan does an incredible job in multiple seats there. He's the protagonist and main actor, but also, I believe, director and a few other roles in the series there. It is some of the best Australian TV you'll see.
Mate, I watched season 1. I didn't restart season 2, and not for any reason other than I just didn't get around to it. I did enjoy season 1. I think he even came up with the concept of Mr. In Between maybe when he was at film school.
Yes,
or
The Magician
something like that.
was a small like indie film he did way back, and you can catch it online, I believe, not through official channels, but that led to later what will become Mr. In Between once it became a syndicated show. So 3 really, really well done seasons. Sure, I know that people want a 4th season, but the series ended in a strong fashion, I believe. And yeah, hopefully we get more from Scott Ryan because he's got a very good mind for this sort of stuff.
Oh, mate, and the thing is too, like just on the music aspect, what's really interesting is how people rediscover songs or music through movies or TV programs. What was the name of there was the song by what's the name that did Wuthering Heights? Kate Bush.
Yes, Running Up That Hill that became really popular. And I think it's the Smashing Pumpkins have a copy of that too. Am I making that up? Or was it Placebo? Running Up That, it was Placebo, I think. Placebo have a good cover of it as well. But yeah, the Kate Bush one became a sensation because of its excellent implementation into Stranger Things. And yeah, it's just cool seeing old things become new or being rediscovered, like you said, 60s, because of just the relationship to something new in media.
Oh, look, there was a great series that was on. I mean, it's going back quite a few years now. It might even be the best part of 15, 20 years ago. British. It was sort of like almost a bit of science fiction mystery about it, but it was essentially a police drama where the bloke time traveled back to the past. Life on Mars. If you've never seen Life on Mars, what just a really brilliant show. But the David Bowie song "Life on Mars," of course, provided the title of the show, but they would cut to, in certain scenes, it would finish with a bit of the music from Life on Mars. I fell in love with that song all over again from watching that TV series. I was just playing it on repeat over and over again, and I cannot hear that song without thinking of that great series now. So it's very clever use of music and certain songs by TV shows, and I think it adds to a reappreciation of the music, but I think it also really adds a lot to the movie or the TV show. But anyway, mate, we're about to go on with NRL news. Before we do, I must also thank our Chris Ricketts, who is putting together this special Off the Cumberland Fence series on the greatest Eels players for the last 50 years by position. Now, Chris is not putting it beyond 50 years because he is not comfortable talking about players that he just didn't see in any way, either in person or on video. And once you start to go beyond 50 years, it's pretty hard to have seen some of the great Parramatta players, especially from the 1960s. So with respect, he's not including those players because he doesn't feel qualified to comment on, but they've already generated a lot of discussion on TCT. He's covered the fullback. He's now up to the wingers. He gives honourable mentions and he gives his top 3. If you haven't had a chance to read it as yet, please do so. And Chris will also be in Las Vegas this year. So our podcast will feature Chris just before he goes to Vegas and about his plans when he's there. And also after Las Vegas, he'll give his feedback on that. Now, much as we did with Ron, our American Parramatta Eels fan last year, he'll do a pre-game pre-event and post-event podcast with us. Okay, mate, so on with the NRL news. We already mentioned about Josh Addo-Carr being available for round 3 because of the inclusion of the Indigenous round as part of the suspension games. Latrell Mitchell is also a beneficiary of that, which means he will now be available from round 1. So that's great news for South Sydney supporters.
Yeah, especially considering what else is coming on the docket for the news. They've got some good news to balance out some bad news, and Latrell's obviously a massive inclusion for that team. I know there's a lot of discourse around his best position and work rate and whatnot, but the reality is that when he's switched on, and you think he's switched on for round 1, he is a devastating player. So a big boon for them for round 1.
Oh, if you ever get, in some respects, there's an element of Jared Hayne about Latrell Mitchell in that, Jared would be criticised from time to time that, maybe he wasn't entirely switched on in games, but he was a freakishly talented player that could do things that other players on the field just couldn't do. And to an extent, although he's maybe not hit some of the dizzying highlight reel heights that Jared did, but there's an element of that with Latrell where supporters feel that maybe he drifts in and out of games. But if you get the Latrell Mitchell firing, he's just like Hayne. He can do things that other players can't, produce something out of nothing. And that is good news for South supporters. It'll be especially good news for them if he has a season where he's switched on for the entire year. But, John, you've got some balancing bad news for the Rabbitohs.
Yeah, we often talk about some luckless players that have their careers impacted by things beyond their control, and injuries and medical stuff are a huge part of that. And so was the case for Campbell Graham, who missed the entirety of last year because of that nasty sternum injury that he sustained the end of the season 2023. And he's looked like he's in the clear for the sternum injury, but he's now picked up, I don't know how severe it is, but it's been severe enough to warrant a media release by South Sydney, a hand injury that has seen him referred to a specialist for further consultation. So no timeline on what that means for him in terms of potential missed games and recovery or surgery, but just more bad luck for a guy that has all the talent in the world but has just been absolutely luckless. He's walked under ladders, broken mirrors, kicked a black cattle free. Something's gone wrong for poor Campbell Graham there, because it has been well over a year since he's taken to the field now for rugby league, which is crazy.
Oh, and look, you can end up with some significant time out from hand injuries. Obviously rugby league with the catching and passing, and just obviously the contact nature of the game, but even the simplest things with catching and passing, if you've got a hand injury, mate, many years ago, I fractured the scaphoid bone in my hand. I was 13 weeks in a cast because it simply took a long time to heal. It should have been 6-7 weeks. The bone didn't heal. I ended up another 6 weeks. It virtually looked like it hadn't healed at all when they took the cast off and x-rayed after that first 6 weeks. So, if it's anything like that, I wouldn't wish it upon him, because it would be an extended period out of the game. There's also balancing, the good news, bad news for the Tigers as well, mate.
Yeah, I suppose, again, you talk about net balancing, and it's probably a net positive. Last episode, we talked about a potential leg injury for Jarome Luai. They had him off to the doctors to get scans following their boot camp, the military-style boot camp, and there was some concerns that he'd be out of action for round 1. It looks like he's in the clear, but the other recruit from Penrith, Sunia Turuva, is now looking like he could be in doubt for round 1 after having his appendix removed, which I can only imagine is appendicitis, which is a nasty little thing that obviously they caught in time, which is good, because it can be very dangerous if it isn't. But that would definitely be a bit of a bump to their backline there if he's not available for round 1, which means he'd probably be available for round 2 to take on the Parramatta Eels.
Oh, well, yeah.
Classic.
I guess
classic.
it works. Yeah. We just feel like it is classic Eels stuff there. But, John, in further news, that's an example of the rugby league gods giveth, the rugby league gods taketh away. We've got the Dragons as well with a little bit of good news, a little bit of bad news.
Yeah, a bit of a theme for the NRL news at the moment, isn't it? Some good, some bad. We talked about last week the fact that there is some lack of clarity around the Francis Molo situation there and a potential holdout and some other issues there. No more clarity on that situation. Obviously, when we do get some more, we'll talk about it in the relevant podcast. But they've also they've gone out and signed a player to boost their forward pack in Emre Guler, who joins them immediately from the Canberra Raiders on a 2-year deal. Guler's got nearly 100 caps to his name. Just a solid first grader, a player you can't really be too unhappy about when it comes to boosting your stocks when you have what I suppose the club would deem a weaker forward pack, because that's clearly been a point of emphasis for Flanagan to recruit around. Guler gives them some experience and versatility through the middle.
Now, if only they can get some halves.
Yeah, well, yes. Like I said, Kyle Flanagan's coming off his best year in the NRL, and I thought he was actually pretty handy last year. But losing Ben Hunt and going with the former Rabbitoh Ilias means that alongside Newcastle is one of the weaker pairings in the NRL, and maybe they'll play above their station in terms of where they're viewed across their peers, but it's a pretty big handicap to have a weak halves pairing, and we've seen it with the Eels in past years, like pre-Mitchell Moses and even Corey Norman, that it's a pretty big handicap for a team.
Yeah, and we say that with respect to the players, because anyone that's logging up NRL appearances is a quality rugby league player.
It's one of those ones where you need to remember the relative, like sort of the paradigm of criticism, right? Where we're being negative on an NRL player here, and it still means they'll whoop our asses if we went onto the field and played against them, and they dominate park footy, they dominate reserve grade footy. It's easy to lose focus of that framing. But when you're being critical of these players, they're still the top 1% of players in the country, and indeed across the world, because rugby league, in the NRL was not just contained to Australia.
Yeah, absolutely. And just heading out of the NRL, but to a former Eels player, we give our best wishes to Micah Sivo, who unfortunately did his ACL playing in a testimonial match for Leeds against Wigan, and Leeds absolutely spanked Wigan in that particular trial game. But, unfortunately, Sivo sustained a season-ending injury in that. And, hopefully for Brad Arthur, the bad luck with injuries that he's experienced the last 2 years with the Eels, last 2 seasons with the Eels, is not going to now extend to Leeds. I mean, Sivo was obviously one of their star recruits for the season, and one would have expected him to absolutely smash his opponents over in England. So, that's bad news. Whether Sivo stays over there or whether he comes back to warmer climates in Australia for his rehab, we don't know. But I would imagine that he'd have, because of the nature of doing rehab and the club paying for it, that he would stay over in England for that rehab. But,
Well, we mentioned it with Campbell Graham, isn't it? Just miserable injury luck sometimes, and Mike has had a fair bit of that. And it's certainly seen him not reach his full ceiling at Parramatta, going back to what it was it 2020? When Hank Scorpio, when Brad Parker got him in the knee?
It was either 20 or 21,
2020 or 2021, and obviously capped off now by a serious injury that's going to mean a long year of rehab for him. So wish him a speedy recovery. You always hate to see it, and can only hope that his luck gets better from here on in.
And, mate, just on a sad note to close out the NRL news, there was the passing of South Sydney legendary player Gary Stevens. Gary Stevens was a member of the South Sydney pack back in the late 60s, early 70s, which they just seemed to produce representative player after representative player. And he Gary Stevens, played, I think, 11 tests or something like that for Australia. One of the noted hard men of rugby league back then, and we send our condolences to his family, his friends, and to South Sydney supporters out there who no doubt are saddened by his passing. Okay, mate, that brings us to the end of the news segment. And here we go. It's all starting. It's time for our first preview podcast of the season, which is the round one matches in the junior representative season. And it's Eels versus the Knights in Harold Matthews and SG Ball, and Eels versus the Raiders in Lisa Fiaola and Tasha Gale Cups.
Yeah, split schedule, unfortunately, for the Eels this week. They're going differing ways out of Sydney, south and north, depending on which gender you are. So we'll start with the Lisa Fiaola and the Tasha Gale Sixties, who head south towards the nation's capital. They're playing out of Raiders Belconnen, the big field there for the Canberra Raiders. 11 a.m. kickoff in the Lisa Fiaola. Eels shape up like this. A lot of new names, but there's still some returning names that we know there, 60s. At fullback, you got Ire Sevilla. On the wings, Sienna Bonello and Freedom Crichton Rapati. There's a pair of returning players there. In the centres, Cody Tuomaseve, Cody, and Hine Rikiti. Halves, Sharon Latapu, another returning player there, and she'll partner Tamike Withers. In the front row, Leona Vi, another second-year prop forward there, alongside Isabella Bell, with Bailey Marchon, the dynamic dummy half, returning for her second year. In the second row, on the edges, you've got Kyson Morgan Pritchard and Mitzi Cairns. At lock forward, it's Katia Duff. On the extended interchange, you've got Riley Cash, Meta Sivo, Olivia Saba, Evelyn Kwendu, and Deja Vivella. Fair few returning names there, 60s. What have we got? We got Sivo, Kwendu. Who else was there? Mitzi Cairns is also a returning player as well.
Yes.
So, pretty experienced team here. There's still plenty of new faces there. Going through the back line, Sevilla, Tuomaseve, Rikiti, Withers. But there's a lot of returning players, which is always a great core to bring that experience to the team. And the Raiders don't know a lot about them when it comes to Lisa Fiaola. The Eels finished third last year. The Raiders were not part of Lisa Fiaola. So they've been pretty successful at the NRLW level, but Pathways, this is their maiden season. It's going to be interesting to see, with the benefit of the home field advantage, what sort of opposition they offer the Parramatta Eels.
Yeah, and of course we don't have any form line that we can go on from this. Obviously there's been the trial matches, but this is now where it gets serious, and you've got the combinations there that the teams have intended to go through, whereas in the trials, they're literally used as trials to trim the squads back. So you have a lot of interesting combinations and like NRL trials, players running on and off the field. So the conditions, the circumstances of the game are a little bit different. The player that I think is the interesting returning player is Bailey Marchong. I thought she was dynamic out of dummy half last year. And with a season under her belt there, I would imagine she's going to be a key player for the Eels in Lisa Fiaola Cup. So we now move on to the Tasha Gale.
Yeah, Saturday, 12:30pm kickoff, same venue, Raiders Belconnen. Eels line up like this. Dallas Graham Wivell at fullback. Nellie Thomas and Aaliyah Scrivens are on the flanks, with Jessamine Aliwale and Maria Fasavalu Falmasuli in the centres. In the halves, it's Sammy Lee Gun Tauai. I'm sorry, Sammy, forgot that wrong. Aliyah Sufan is the halfback. In the front row, Armani Lee Ova'a and Tess McWilliams with Roy Mueller at dummy half. On the edges, Fontaine Tufunga and Matoishi Kalepu. Riverly Arlo was a lock forward. On the extended interchange, Ava Jones, Kalia Gray, Tala Falaniko, Alana O'Loughlin, and Shia Tokolich. So lots of returning faces or graduating faces there, 60s. Looks like a good team on paper for the Eels. And then again, so we go to Tasha Gale from last year. Raiders were actually in this competition, so they weren't part of Fiaola, but they were part of Gale. And they finished with the same splits as the Eels. 4 wins from 10 starts, 4 losses, and a bye. And so I was getting my points and games played mixed up there. So they came from the same base last year, and their points differential was pretty close as well. So considering that, this should be a pretty close game on paper. Raiders do have the edge of playing with the home field, but the Eels will be looking to start their season strongly. So it'll be interesting to see how they react to the challenge now. Yeah,
as you said, a few returning faces there. I think I really like the back rower and lock Fontaine Tufunga and Rivaliaro. I thought they were standout players last year.
They got some time playing Harvey Norman Women's Premiership too, so they should be well seasoned for this level of grade now.
Yeah, and Rory was in the Lisa Fiola last year, was she not?
I believe so.
Yeah, she's not returning in terms of returning Tasha Gale. I think she's an elevation from Lisa Fiola last year. But it's a learning process for us because there are a number of new faces there. So we'll be seeing some of them for the first time and learning about the form lines as we go. Harold Matthews, mate.
Yeah, so this actually, even though they're playing at different venues, chronologically follows this game nicely. It's a 2:30 p.m. kickoff at Cessnock Sport Ground in Cessnock. What a shock. Eels taking on the Knights. At fullback, Cyrus Bloomfield returning for his second year in Harold Matts. You've got Christopher Mwala and Parker Perota Dowling on the flanks. In the centres, it's Cordell Pritchard and Epapara Tahu Apiata. Halves see Talon Rosati, a talented young 5'8" who played last year, making his second year in Harold Matts. He'll partner Zayn Alamadine. Front row sees Stephen Nunn and Chase Attard as props. Jiro Trey Stewart is the dummy half. In the back row, Michael Noah reprises his role on the edge, with Kasinga Noah getting the start on the other edge spot. Samuel Paulo, who was excellent on the edges last year, he moves to lock forward 60s. Interesting move there. He's a high work rate, high energy player, so I imagine he'll handle that transition pretty well. On the interchange, Hayden Bell, Mark Peterson, Retrick Smith-Jessup, and Jermaine Fa'afiu round out the standard bench spots, with the extended roster being shared by Stranz Schmalkel, Zach Withers, and Samuel Sorovi. So big extended bench there for the Parramatta Eels, but they are making a road trip, so you always have those extra precautions and provisions available in terms of their playing group. But yeah, a lot of returning faces again. Some players that we expect to star in the likes of Bloomfield, Rosati, the two back rowers, Noah and Polly. Kasinga Noah was also very good last year as well. So really good core group of players there. A lot of question marks, exciting question marks about all the new players. And we'll come to figure out their games in the coming weeks. But it starts here, 2:30 p.m. out at Cessnock. So yeah, going to be really interested to see this one play out. And we will hopefully have access to all these game 60s, because we didn't mention it in the NRL news, but New South Wales Rugby League TV is now not dead, but now partnered with a new media partner that is going to be covering all these junior rep games on a subscription basis. So
yeah, Bar TV
Sports
yeah.
covering all junior reps.
If people head to the New South Wales Rugby League website, they will be able to see the subscription that's available. I think it's the best part of $20 a month.
It's not cheap. It's $20 a month. But you do gain access to the full New South Wales Rugby League complement of games, I believe, which is all junior reps or, I believe, New South Wales Cup games. So there is certainly value there in terms of your weekend, but that's on a sort of person-to-person basis.
Yeah, but as for this first weekend, we'll be providing, all through this season, we'll be providing live blogs. So anyone that is not able to see the game, anyone that via subscription or in person, we get out to as many games live as we can, and we provide coverage every week. And it'll be a challenge this year with the most rounds at the boys and the girls venues are split. I think there might be maybe 2, 3 at the most. I think we're at the same venue, same opponent, same day. But other than that, they're pretty much split up all over the place this year. But we will provide that coverage. And, of course, we know that coverage is enjoyed by people, not just watching it live, but coming in and being involved in discussions about how the team performed. Because when we provide the live trial blogs, we would get probably we get several thousand people that read it, and probably 2/3 of the people who are reading it are doing so after the game is wrapped up. So we know that a lot of people like to be able to catch up on what happened and and discuss what's happened or read opinions about what's happened. So we will continue to do that for you this year, despite the fact that there is also that live streaming service that's available. Mate, just on the Harold Matt's team and seeing their form in a couple of trials, it was a little bit of a mixed bag in the two trials that I saw. The game against Canterbury, they absolutely demolished the Bulldogs, demolished them. The score was flattering to the Bulldogs, and there were probably points that were left out there, but they were just too strong, too fast. Their game was up tempo. The Dogs were backpedaling for most of the game. Then they lost the following week against the Panthers. Now, there were some players that didn't play, as I'm sure that was the case with the Panthers as well. The Panthers looked particularly strong in the Harold Matts. I think they lost by, about 10 points in the end, something like that. But it was Penrith looked very strong that day and looked like the winners all the way through. It was, I won't say it was a reverse of what the form was the previous week for the Eels against the Bulldogs, because I thought Parramatta performed much better than the Bulldogs did when they played Parramatta. But I think the team will be looking to step up a little bit on that last up trial, and seeing the players that will be available and who have been named in this, I would expect that that's going to be the case. You mentioned Samuel Polly, mate, moving from second row to lock. It's that indication of that the more mobile lock
could be a
role
club directive, right?
In the NRL.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But,
and now we move to wrap things up with the SG Ball.
Yeah, late kickoff of the SG Ball, 4:00 p.m. out at Cessnock Sport Ground. Usually the reps are all wrapped up by about 3 o'clock, so late start here for our fellas in the first round. And they're taking on a team of the Knights that are traditionally very strong in the SG Ball. They look like this, the Eels, that is. At fullback, Nathan Howlett. On the wings, Dom Ferrugia, coming out of that NRL preseason, looking to make a splash in the ball. On the other flank, you got Lorima Rokasuka, Anders Johansson and Lockie Vella are the two centres. In the halves, Cameron Bamblett joins the Eels by way of Penrith. Excited to see how he partners with Lincoln Fletcher, who was coming off an Australian schoolboys campaign last year, 60. So big basis for young Lincoln in his first year of ball to build off there. In the front row, you got Bo Lucian and Max Popo. Lockie Kornakis, another Aussie schoolboy, is at dummy half. In the back row, Josiah Funai-Yuta, a preseason standout in the NRL, making his SG Ball start. Be interesting to see how long he sticks around this grade. Obviously looking to make a big splash, though. On the other edge slot, a player that impressed you in the preseason, and Christopher Petrus, with Mason Ong at lock forward. On the interchange, you got Tom Summer, Wesley Picodi, Ryder Talangi, another Australian schoolboy there. Mark Williams rounding out the 4 conventional slots. The 2 reserve players, Corey Lee and Phoenix Tawasa. Sorry, Phoenix. So good-looking squad here. Couple players of NRL preseason experience in Dom and Josiah, so really keen to see how they attack this game. You don't want to overplay their hand 60s, but obviously you're holding to a high standard. We've got a lot of Australian schoolboys. We've got Lincoln Fletcher and Cameron Bamblett making their partnership debut, so keen to see how that plays out. Looks like a pretty well-balanced team, some strike in the back line and the forward pack there. But Newcastle, always very good in this grade, so they're going to be a great hit out for our boys, and with that, again, the home field advantage is going to be a tough beat in round 1.
Yeah, a good test for round 1. Look, the Eels SG Ball team had a quite an impressive pre-season. They scored in the 3 trials over 100 points for. and conceded only 24. They were so dominant over the Panthers in that last trial, with, again, plenty of players that didn't take the field in that game. Again, without really knowing the Panthers team, that could have been the case with the Panthers as well. But it was a very, very good hit out for the last trial for the Eels. You talked about some of the players and their pedigree, and I can tell you that just looking at it, we know there's players that haven't made the team. I'm not talking about players that haven't made the squad, because there were some players that didn't make the squad who might have been expected to. But just looking at the two on the extended reserve list, Phoenix Tualsa, mate, he had a blinder in that game against Penrith in that last trial.
Mm-hmm.
He was one where the first thing I did after the game was make inquiries about who was playing on that edge, because of just how well he went. And I hadn't noticed him before. I think from memory we might have picked him up through the Panthers. Don't quote me on that, but he may be a former Panther player. But and Corey Lee, of course, who we're familiar with from the Harold Matts and SG Ball last year. Primarily a fullback, but I think can play some other positions. But then you look at, as I said, the pedigree of some of the players. You're talking about Dom Ferrugia and Josiah Funa-Iuta doing NRL pre-seasons up to Christmas. So they've had that elite level preparation during the pre-season. And then you've got the Australian schoolboys there and plenty of familiar faces to Eels supporters. Cameron Bamblett, I believe he's another Panthers player that has joined the Eels this year. We're still trying to chase up whether he's related to Tamara. Is Tamara Bam?
Talara.
Talara.
Yeah, very talented player in the female pathways for the Eels.
Yes. So, mate, it's great first up match for the Eels, and that basically brings us to the conclusion of this podcast. How did we come in time-wise, considering we've thrown in a preview?
Just over 58 minutes as we chat and yak right now. So very strong on the brevity this week, which is fantastic. So didn't prattle on too long, and we managed to squeeze in 4 quick previews for the junior reps, which is very exciting because that's going to expand moving forwards as the NRL trials and the NRL come upon us. But yeah, football's back, baby. It can't be better timed, because that footy fever from the preseason that's helped drive all the engagement on TCT, it's got us too, mate. I'm itching for some football.
Yes, and we will return to having our guest host with us for the news podcast, but we've recorded this middle of the day on Thursday, which has given us that opportunity that's the two of us able to record. It sort of has helped a little bit with the brevity as well, I guess, that we're only adding in 2 opinions for different items on our news agenda. But as always, mate, thank you for your fine work in this podcast. Thank you to our listeners who, as I said, have been, we really appreciate the numbers of people that are listening at the moment. It's really, it drives us to want to be better at what we do for our fellow Eels supporters out there. Thank you to our sponsors, Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan and Parramatta, and to the sponsors of our junior league coverage, Parramatta Leagues Club. Truly the home of the Eels, and it's always the place to be, not just on match days, but every other day during the week. So check out what's on at Parra Leagues Club. Check out the great menus at the various eating establishments within the club. And don't forget to check your emails for the details of the AGM and voting for directors there. And John, as I always say, go you mighty Eels.